Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome one and all to another live stream. This time with Vicky Poole of Tender Response. We've been talking a lot recently about carbon and carbon reduction. And I believe there's a webinar coming up today that's starring Vicky talking about just this topic. Tell us more, Vicky.
Absolutely. So in an hour's time, I'm joined by two industry specialists. We're going to be speaking to Greg Gormley from Scoot and James Napier from Notch, formerly known as CBN Expert. And we're going to be talking about the mechanisms that your businesses can use to capture your carbon correctly, which is carbon reporting, and looking at offset and emission reduction strategies and tactics. So if you're free at 12:30, it's going to be a really great opportunity to learn a bit more about the industry. And of course, the most important thing is no salespeople will be calling. You'll be invited. I know, exactly. It's free. You'll be invited to join the newsletter list for every the upcoming topics that are coming up. So June, we've got an interesting month. I'm just shortly to announce those on the website about our 2 topics in June. And yeah. Everyone's welcome. There's no cost to join.
Well, it's amazing, actually, this topic. It keeps coming up. I was only speaking to somebody yesterday about carbon reporting and how to do it and how it's quite a process achieving a carbon report. And all the tenders that you put forward have some element of carbon reporting in them. Is that right?
They have a carbon reduction plan in them. So your carbon reduction plan, which has been out now since, I think it was 2013, the first carbon reduction plan template came out. So that's simply where companies set their stall out and say, I'm currently using 10 metric ton of carbon a year, and I'm going to reduce it by 5 ton of carbon by this date. And these are the initiatives that I'm going to be doing. Wow. Whereas before you could just pin like where you're going to go in a map. In the new world, you need to report on your effectiveness to get there. And there's fines if you don't do it. Or
Yikes.
I know. There's fines if you don't do it, or there's fines if you don't provide the information that you're asked for in an appropriate amount of time.
Wow. So you've got to get off your skates. But it's complex. I mean, the guy I spoke to yesterday was going into paroxysms of craziness, talking about the information that you need to pull, and that it's not that easy to get as a common or garden human being. You really need to know your onions.
Well, you do and you don't. And this is another reason why, if you're in the same boat, please join our webinar today. We're going to be speaking with James Napier from Notch. They have some really, really cool carbon accounting software.
Right.
And that helps you in order to be able to track and manage your carbon.
Right.
So there are different tools to make things easier, which I think is kind of like our topic today, Gareth. The softwares that people use to make responding to bids easy. And it's not just responding to bids. You can use all sorts of different softwares to make your reporting easier. So you get your KPI reports that you report on. And everyone's used to like a ticket system, right? So when someone phones up or makes a complaint or does something with your business or interacts in your business in any way, you can report on like the response time, how long it took to raise a ticket, when was a resolution sought. And in the same way as with the carbon reduction that we're going to be talking about later today, you can do the same in bids.
Wow. So well, it pays dividends then.
Yes and no. Oh. Yes and no. So throughout my life, I have used many different softwares in order to respond to bids. And I'm going to be controversial here. I'm going to say Tender Response does not use a bid management software.
No. Hang on. Hold the phone. This whole topic is about which bid software to use.
Yeah, it's called Word and Excel.
Ah, right. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, so when you are responding to bids, you get 2 forms that need to be completed. You have your standard qualification questionnaire,
right,
SQQ, which is a series of standard information that needs to be inserted every time. So you have a template, and then you copy and paste that template across. Now, in my experience, responding to bids is about looking at the really quick wins, the yes/no answers. Well, looking at the softwares, those softwares are tens of thousands of pounds a year. Or you could have an admin in a team who could do it for you.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
So when you're looking at that from a net cost perspective, it costs in for me to not have a software to do that. And of course, I can hear people are shouting. I can hear it. I can hear them shouting already. But Vic, what about responding to the qualitative questions, the written response, the other document that you guys need to produce responses to?
Right.
Well, there are some times where you get stock questions. So, for example, tell me about your approach to project management. How are you going to ensure that this project is mobilized and delivered to time?
Yes.
That will be based on a per project basis. So that needs to be written afresh every time. So the fact that you've got 5 previous submissions of how brilliant your PMO is good. It's valuable content, but you're only ever going to have a maximum of half that's already used, and that can be reused again. You're still going to have to write another half from scratch. And when you're restricted on word count, it can be really, really difficult. So we often just use to keep that stock content or the previous examples as we've got constructive feedback on this. Let's shape it again for the new response. So it's a response written afresh. Where you get statements, which is, tell us about your 9001 policy and approach, or write 1,000 words about your approach to 14,001 and how you're compliant. That's generally a stock response. But that's only like 1 question out of 7 or 1 question out of 8. I'm working on a tender at the moment where we've got 28 questions. And you know what? Of those 28 questions, only 3 of them are stock responses, complete stock responses. So why would you pay extra for a software that would tell you that it's those? And of course, the other big thing that I like and I don't like about software, bid writing software, is that it doesn't read the scope of works.
Oh.
So you have no way of being able to assess whether or not the stock content that you're pulling across is actually stock content. So I always grab a cup of tea, and you can tell by the size of it, it's about the same size as my head. This is a proper mug of tea. And we go through the scope of works. We do it manually. Yes, it takes us a little bit longer, but we then don't have to charge you extra to cover the costs of using the big, expensive, fancy software.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that it averages out, people.
So, but what about AI?
Gareth, who's a bit of a software tech lovey person. He loves his tech. He's probably twitching at the thought of this.
No, not at all. I mean, I was actually going to say something even more controversial. Can't you get AI just to fill it in for you?
Oh wow! So we received. I know. I heard. So one of my competitors and I had a conversation the other week over lunch, and I know I'm friendly with the competition and everything. And they were saying that they're responding to a framework bid. So they were thinking about writing the framework response and then just using AI to alter it. I said, good luck. And they ended up pulling 20 hours a day last week because they then realized that they needed to rewrite the exact content from scratch. Because whilst AI is brilliant at doing so many things, being able to adjust and reflect language so that it's unique to an individual's business is too much of a step right now. Because I'll give you an example. So the way that people get into their car and make themselves ready to drive off is going to be different. So me, I get in, I make sure that my kids are fastened in. Even if the kids aren't with us, I still have to physically check the cars because I've got mum brain. And then I put my belt on, I check my mirrors. I then put the car in the ignition and I wait for my phone to sync before starting the ignition because sustainably minded and all. And then I start the ignition, I put the car into drive and I move. That's a completely different order to my husband. So if the process is take your car from its driving place and drive to the shops, you know, the first bit is what makes you specific, what makes you unique. Right. The physical process of driving, I mean, we've all passed our driving test, if you've got your driving test, of course. Then how you drive is going to be the standard, it's going to be standardized. The physical process of how you do it, how you make yourself ready, that's unique to you. So then you need to shape it. That needs to be unique to you. And AI is it's just not there yet. It's just not there.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be saying, but can't you just take some of the sections and throw that at AI? Can't you use AI for doing discrete areas rather than the whole thing?
So I do use AI on some occasions. When you've got 1,000-word response and you're at 1,003 words and you've used every possible trick to get your response down from the 1,100 words that it was down to 1,003, I do run it through AI and say, where could I rephrase something here to drop 3 words? And sometimes it changes 3 sentences and sometimes it changes 1. There are some things that you can do where you can take some text and you can convert it into an image, assuming that the image has no text in it, because text in images counts towards words. And of course, AI doesn't quite understand that.
No,
so if you were to say, we've got 1,000-word response to this question, here is some stock content that totals 3,000 words, give me 1,000-word response. It's going to struggle to do that because it's looking at a question that's dumb. It doesn't tell you the scope of works. So in the scope of works, there will be an outline of how something needs to be done.
Right.
So going back to the learning to drive example, or pulling your car off of the drive, it will say things like the vehicle needs to have its engine turned on before the phone can be Bluetoothed, or before the phone connection can be enabled through Bluetooth, which would make my process, if I was just talking about myself, non-compliant, because I would put my phone in the ignition, turn the ignition on for the Bluetooth to connect. That would make my response non-compliant. So you can't just throw a question into AI and just expect it to produce a response, because the detail of how you need to be compliant is within the scope of works, or within Appendix 1, or which is often referred to as the scheduled requirements. It needs more. And I can see Gareth's typing. Do we have anyone asking a question?
Somebody actually sent me a WhatsApp. I was watching it as this WhatsApp doing a question. The gentleman I spoke to the other day, and I'm giving him your contact details, so hopefully he'll call you.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, well, he's a person who's a specialist in creating carbon, what you call them, things. Reports, that's it. Carbon reporting.
Oh, lovely. Yes. I love to build up my repertoire of carbon reporting. So yes, people, I'm conscious of time today. So when you're looking at softwares to make your bids better and make your responses easier, the best softwares that you can use are the traditional ones. You got your Word, you got your Excel. And by all means, please do read your scope of works. We normally write down the specifics of the requirements on a pad of paper, and then make sure, and then they go from pads of paper to post-it notes, and then those post-it notes go into the response.
And what I would say is also the one thing that Vicky's saying overall is there's no form of automation out there yet, AI or otherwise, that will make filling in those bids that much easier yet. And you're still needing the same old little grey cells, spreadsheets and Word documents. Thank you so much once again, Vicky, for setting all of us straight on that. And as ever, now I'm going to go through a couple of things as per usual. You'll notice there's a link down the bottom towards today's shindig. Please book in there if that's the sort of thing that gets you going. And also, more importantly, Oh no, don't say it's me.
.com/carbon impact report. That is a webinar that's starting in half an hour. It's free to join, free to register.
And if you want to ask Vicky any questions, this is her WhatsApp and telephone number. Please have at it. I think you'll be surprised at how she can set you straight with just a few words. It may well be that you want to have a further consultation. I wish you only the best of luck with today's efforts, Vicky. I know that that anybody who comes will find themselves. It'll be well worth it for them, and they'll find themselves educated and entertained. And all I can say to everyone is, if you've been watching this regularly, you'll know how useful the information Vicky puts out is. Here's also some useful tools that she's provided in general terms for prepping or working out whether or not what you're intending to do with a tender is right for you. Once again, I do say, please contact her in the first instance if you've got queries about this. But finally, I'm just going to put this again once at the bottom. If you want to jump in at the last minute, please do so. tinyurl.com/carbon impact report. Thank you so much, Vicky. To all of you out there, I wish you a very safe and wonderful week, and of course, safe mental health. Bye-bye now.